Go for it. In this video, we want to go through and show you the thought processes and the engineering that went behind creating the StarGard. This wasn't just a fly-by-night, throw it on a 3D printer and stick it on the RV. That is not the way this was designed. We took a lot of time and a lot of effort to make sure that this thing's going to be solid, it's going to work smooth, and it's not going to go flying off your RV as you go down the road, nor is it going to come off in the middle of a big storm, which has already been proven, by the way, unfortunately. So let's talk about how we got there. So in the original WindGard sensor mount, there was a mount, mine broke because it's 30 years old and it was old plastic that broke. This plastic, the WindGard antenna was out here. These two here bolted into the two metal rods that allowed it to move up and down smoothly. So we started with this. Mine had broken off already, so we disconnected. So this is what I had to work with. So the first thing that we wanted to do, and we use very inexpensive, your normal 3D print plastics to begin with, just to kind of get our first prototypes and see that it's going to work. So what we did was we took these measurements off of here and these widths and the piece across here and made our first piece. And that's where we came up with this piece. Now, when we first created our first prototype, we had the lines, we had basically the same height, maybe a little bit taller, because we wanted a little extra room in there because, you know, we wanted to be able to have it up a little bit. We're trying to gain space each time so that the way the antenna's set, it would miss the bars when it sat all the way down. So anyway, when we went on our first one, we were trying to figure out, we noticed that the old one wiggled a lot on the thing, and we didn't want it wiggling going down the road. So our first prototype, our first experiment, was trying to line the holes up and to make sure, and to maybe squeeze it a little bit, see how it comes together, so that it would squeeze it and would hold it tight. Well, after we did our first prototype, what we discovered was, well, we missed the holes a little bit. We had missed one of the holes, misaligned one of the holes. But what we discovered when we put it together, we were using the standard pins that was holding that on. We discovered that having it that tight made it almost impossible to raise and lower it because it was just squeezing it too tight. So it has to be very close to the two metal rods, and that's what we did. So we made prototype number 2, which looks like the other one. Now what's interesting about this is, as we were doing our prototypes, we used the less expensive standard plastic. Well, this was actually out in the sun here in the Texas heat, 95, 100 degrees out here, and it warped a little bit as it was there. But you can see we were trying to make, again, we were going to make a straight piece. We had the holes lined up properly, and we went in those. Now, so these holes lined up better, and we then, and the reason actually it's like that, because it actually stayed on the RV like this for about a week and a half, just so that, you know, because we weren't quite, once we saw this, we knew we were ready to go. We ordered the StarLink mobility mount kit, because this uses the standard StarLink mobility mount kit. And while we were waiting on it to arrive, this was sitting on my RV and waiting for the next weekend for me to go and take a look at it and to work on it. So that's where the heat came from. So we discovered a couple of things. So we already knew that we couldn't use this plastic, but we knew that we wanted to do something. So we waited for the StarLink, and this sat out there. So what we discovered was this worked really well, but again, we had a little bit of wiggle in it. What we discovered on that wiggle was that the old thing, being 30 years old, sitting on the RV running, had actually wallered out the holes on the metal rods that it was bolting to. So those holes we had to redo. Well, we also discovered that while it works fine, you stand it up and it does everything it needs to do on the standard length, we found that it would work better, especially moving it, rotating it, if the bars were shorter. So we actually shortened the bars down, re-drilled the holes, which gave us a much tighter fit on the holes, and we drilled them at the right size that we wanted. And I think we're using 1/4 inch stainless bolts now. We're not using the pins anymore. We're using stainless steel bolts and lock nuts to hold it in. That made a huge difference in how much wiggle it came out of and how well it's moved, and also how smooth it moved up and down, because it was a shorter throw on it once we got it up. So once we got StarLink in, the mobility mount, we were able to determine what the holes were going to be on the StarLink mount. And we made, this was our next prototype. And again, this was made in the less rigid standard plastic out there, just again because we didn't want to use the expensive stuff until we got it figured out. So with that, what we did was we added the plate to mount the StarLink mobility mount on. We also decided that we wanted some bracing down each side in order to give us a little bit more wiggle left and right. We didn't like having just this piece in the middle, because boy, that would wiggle a lot as wide as that plate was, right? So we decided to add these to it, which was a great idea, made a big difference for us. And then we of course also had to cut holes in for access for the bolts to go through. So we did that. And so once we got that plate figured out, we had the StarLink mounted on it. We saw that it worked. We saw that was the right thing and that it was going to work. We took the StarLink off the top of the RV, and then we bought the heavy duty plastic that is not only heat resistance, but it's also UV resistance. And in that process, we made a few design changes. I think we made this plate a little bit thicker. It's mounted on the RV right now, and we've still got yet another coming out, and we'll talk about that. So let's look at the fourth iteration of the StarLink mount. Okay, so this is the fourth iteration of the adapter. Now, we didn't make that many changes to it, but there were changes we did make were pretty important. One is that the holes that we combined in here, we made them a little bit larger so that we could put sockets through there to make it easier to bolt on. The other thing we did was we went, these holes here, we went a little tighter, and in the actual bolt holes, can you see through there? The bolt holes through there, we actually made those a little bit tighter so it wouldn't be as much wiggle. And if you notice that instead of the black plastic, this is now the white. And this, and here's the old one. This is considerably heavier than this white. They are basically the same size, but it's heavier and it's UV resistant now. So this is definitely much better. So this was the fourth prototype. This is the one that I put on the RV. I mounted the StarLink on it. You can see I put two marks on it because when it becomes important which way you put the adapter on it, so when it fits on, it's pointing the right direction with the slope down toward the front of the RV that you're pulling or driving. So anyway, I made those marks just to kind of know where we're at. We went driving down the road with this one at 70, 75 miles an hour downhill at times, and it kept a good solid internet connection all the way down. We got to the beach. I will show a quick video after I do on this, and there was a storm going on. So here's the storm that was there, and this thing held up through it. So as you can see, the storm was pretty rough, but this held up really tight. The last iteration we do, that's the one that's on the thing. I've got a still picture of it because I've already mounted it. I got a still picture of it. I'll show you the still picture and then I'll talk about it then. So this is the final iteration and what you will get in your StarGard adapter kit. As you can see, the kit contains the actual adapter itself, 2 stainless steel bolts of different sizes, and 3 zip ties. The 2 bolts, the shorter bolt goes in the upper section and the longer bolt goes in the bottom section, because in the bottom sections, one of the changes that we made in the last iteration
was to bring the bolts on the outside of the actual device itself. So you see there's a little bit of shoulder there now for the bottom bolt and nut to go through, and the top bolt doesn't have that shoulder. That shoulder was brought out to avoid trying to get a screw wrenches inside those little holes, which is something we learned as we tried to put the last one on. But other than that, this is what you get. That's probably the biggest changes we made, was the tightening of the holes a little bit so there's no wiggle. The shoulders that we put on there, we did make the top holes on the outside on the gussets a little bit bigger for to make it easier for sockets. But other than that, everything else pretty much remained the same as the previous iteration, because that one just held up so well. So when you order the kit, this is the final product that you will get, and this makes mounting your StarLink super easy, super fast, and it will hold up to traffic, storms, and make it easier for you to reposition your antenna.